And these come out as nanoparticles. Now, nanoparticles are not new. These are particles less than 1 micron. There's nothing new about nanoparticles. We've known for a long time that they're produced in any high-temperature combustion, whether it's a diesel truck, a coal-fired power station, or any industrial burner. We know we produce nanoparticles. What is new is nanotechnology, the use of nanoparticles in everything with very interesting properties, used in everything from shaving cream to tennis rackets. And somebody asked the bright question of, are there any health consequences of nanoparticles? And the answer that's come back is, wow, they have exquisitely worrying health properties, nanoparticles. Now, as I said, nanoparticles are associated with high temperature combustion. The problem with incineration is that every toxic substance that you use in commerce is probably going to end up in the incinerator, which means that those toxic substances have the potential to end up in nanoparticles, which in turn have the potential to end up in every tissue in your body, including the brain, and I will explain that in a moment. But the first thing to note is that they're unregulated. There are no there are no regulations in the world which regulates nanoparticles coming out of incinerators. Instead, we regulate by mass the particulate, the 10-micron particulate, which is like regulating cannonballs when what you're interested in is little grains of sand. So no regulation, no monitoring, no accountability. The company can say anything they want about nanoparticles because nobody is going to be checking. No authority on this planet should be sanctioning the introduction of more nanoparticles via incineration until these questions that are posed in this paper have been answered. But as far as I can see, the incinerator industry is choosing to ignore this, which is partly because they're not regulated. So let me explain some of the dangers. First of all, these particles are so tiny, they're extremely difficult to capture. It's like capturing ball bearings with a tennis net. Very, very tiny. Secondly, they travel long distances. Do you know the nanoparticles released in the Iraq war with the uranium-tipped missiles were detected in England, 3,000 miles or so away? You can see the peak in the radioactivity from uranium detected in 4 or 5 of the stations around England which track radiation because of your nuclear power stations. They picked up that peak from Iraq. So those nanoparticles can travel a long way. Also, they remain suspended for long periods of time. They're so tiny, they just don't move very fast to ground. And this becomes even more acute if you have a topography like yours and you locate the incinerator where they plan to locate it, because you have large hills around and they will trap. There will be periods where the air will be stagnant and nothing will be blown out of the valleys. And lastly, and the most seriously, they penetrate deep into the lungs. When they get to the lung membrane here, this is the lung membrane, they're so tiny they can go straight through. There's no defense. Straight through the lung membrane, into the bloodstream. Once they're into the blood, they're distributed throughout the body. They can enter every tissue, including the brain. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. And here is a particle in brain tissue, and the electron microscope indicates the elements present, which in this case were lead, barium, chromium, iron, and silicon. Now I'd like a few words about dioxins. I can provide people with a far more detailed PowerPoint on dioxins, something that's close to my heart, but this is just a very short summary. Number one, dioxins accumulate in animal fat, big time. And in fact, a paper that I did with my colleague Tom Webster in 1987, we showed that 1 liter of cow's milk would give you the equivalent dose of 8 months of breathing. In other words, you'd have to stand next to the cow for 8 months and breathe the air to get the same amount of dioxin that you get in 1 liter of cow's milk. These grazing animals are like vacuum cleaners as far as dioxin is concerned. In fact, a more recent German study indicates that you would have to stand in a field next to the cow for 14 years to get the same amount of dioxin that the cow gets in one day. So the cow is grazing, eating the grass on which the dioxin particulates are landing. You are breathing the air. 14 years of human breathing put into a cow in one day. What does that mean? That means you don't have to live near the incinerator to get the dioxin. What does that mean? It means that this poses a threat to agriculture. Not just a real threat, but a perceived threat. And anybody who's in agriculture knows perception is everything. It's much easier for the big purchasing people to say, I won't buy crops, food from within 50 miles of an incinerator than actually go to the trouble and the expense of measuring dioxin in all kinds of samples. It costs $1,000 a shot to measure dioxin in a sample. Okay, so the next problem is that normally when we are subjected to soluble in fat substances, whether they're drugs that we take for medicine or whether they're pollutants, what the liver is busy doing is to convert them into water-soluble byproducts. And once the liver has done that, then you can get rid of them. The water soluble can now be excreted through the kidney. You get rid of them. But in the case of dioxins, the liver can't do that. The liver can't convert them from fat soluble to water soluble, so the end result is they accumulate in our fat, and they accumulate over our lifetime. Now, the male cannot get rid of dioxins at all, but the woman can. A woman can get rid of dioxins by having a baby. And so here's the story, and I think this is the most frightening aspect of this. The woman is accumulating dioxin in her body fat simply by drinking milk, eating cheese, beef, pork, and so on. It's almost certainly not showing any obvious damage in her. But during the 9 months that she's pregnant, that dioxin is moving from her fat into the fetus, which of course is minuscule compared to the adult, compared to the mother. And so the effective concentration is huge. And then to add in the last and distressing factor is that dioxins interfere fetal and infant development. They have that potential. They have that potential because they behave like fat-soluble hormones, and hormones regulate development. They switch things on and off. And dioxins interfere with both male and female sex hormones, so there's the potential there for interfering with sexual development, and also interferes with thyroid hormones, therefore has the potential to interfere with brain development. Now, there's a brilliant paper written by Linda Birnbaum, who under the Obama administration is now the head of the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. She stood up to industry. I saw her stand up to industry on trying to demonstrate that dioxin was a concern. For many years, the chemical industry, the paper industry, the waste industry argued that dioxins were bad for animals but okay for human beings. She was able to run rings around them, and that's an important paper. Well, this has been a very rushed trip here to Plymouth and Ivybridge. I'm so sorry that many of you weren't able to come to my presentation last night, but I hope you will take the time to look at a videotape that Ian has made of my presentation. I do think you owe it to the citizens here to hear both sides of this issue. I'm sure you spent hours and hours with the company Viridor that wants to build this incinerator in this incredibly beautiful part of Devon, of Britain, in fact world famous area. In my view it's an abomination, but at least hear both sides of this issue, and you will hear that there is a very rational and alternative strategy to burning our waste, whether it's domestic or commercial. And I go into details about that. In my view, even if you made this incineration safe, and I don't think you can with agriculture in the area because the cows, etc., capture the dioxins, but even if you made it safe, you would never make it sensible. It simply does not make sense in the 21st century to spending money destroying resources that we should be sharing with the future.